Oh, hello there. Yes, well, very much midweek, isn't it? Yes, anyway, we've had all the scintillating stuff of the DNC conference in Windy City, Chicago, which looks increasingly like it's going to be a walkover. Donald Trump does look a bit like a haunted man these days, like somebody's let the air out of him, which of course is going to really hack people off on this side of the pond because it wasn't the way things are supposed to be. So cue probably lots and lots of people complaining about a stolen election. No doubt. Anyway, today I thought we'd just have a think about what people are concerned about, because we keep getting this consistent message from the right-wing media, which doesn't unfortunately seem to necessarily reflect actual reality. The things that they say that we should be concerned about, we just aren't. I mean, think about all of the airtime that Talk TV and the Daily Mail, the Daily Express, the Daily Telegraph and GB News give to Prince Harry, whereas you and I don't care. On a blunt level, do we? Do you care? No, you don't. Being honest about it, not in the slightest, and yet magically there it is, swallowing up about 10% of their airtime. I guess it beats talking about important things, which might well give you a clue as to why it's done. Yes, anyway, so we can talk about that sort of stuff today. But I thought it was worthwhile looking back at the when was that? Oh yes, the election last month, basically, and about what people's concerns were and the way that they're not realistically talked about, or if they are talked about, it's simply through a particular prism which certain people with particular financial interests want to talk about. So let's have a look, YouGov stuff here, so it's reasonably official, about what people were concerned about. Okay, so first up was obviously the cost of living. Now, people are fully aware of how much poorer they are. Collectively, right, okay? All of our services have gone to pot because basically we needed tax cuts for rich people, and the people at the bottom are basically poorer because we couldn't spend any money on benefits because we needed tax cuts for rich people. So the cost of living is it. We have inflation, which is now thankfully coming down, as inevitably it would do. Not really rushy, but there we go. So that was the thing. Obviously, if people are feeling poor, there are going to be lots of knock-on effects of that. Now, the various right-wing media stuff that I quoted before will try and persuade you that all of this is due to migrants, but it isn't, is it? That isn't the reason. The reason why people feel poor is because way back in 2010, the then government decided in a very libertarian way that they wanted to simply leap at the idea that if they gave loads and loads and loads and loads and loads of money to rich people, that we'd all magically become better off, because they still earnestly believe that. And here we are 15 years later, and no, it's not the real thing, is it? Now, yes, let's look at the next thing on the list, shall we? Health. Yes, everybody knows how bad things are compared to Blair. So, is that migrants? No, well, of course, it might well be the Marxist junior doctors, or again, could it be after 15 years of austerity, that's simply where we've arrived at? I mean, our current glorious Labour Party will probably sell that off as well to the highest bidder, including your data. But will things get better? Maybe a little bit, but not by much. But the reason everybody knows, and the reason why people didn't vote Conservative at the last election, because they knew full well that they had run the service down. It wasn't the Marxist junior doctors, even if they do get a pay increase. The gits. And again, we'll come on to that one, I'm sure. Immigration and asylum. Well, having spent basically at least 5 years and basically realistically about 10 years telling us about migration, some people will obviously find that that's the case. And basically Conservative and Reform voters. That's about 20% of the population. And you can go there with those people if you really want to. They are people who at Brexit were told, that big lie, that we would be in control. But now magically that isn't a thing, is it? Yes, because the wrong people are in control now, so it's a very bad thing, yes. Moving down, environment and climate change. Yes, you may notice that because a lot of people want to make vast profits out of our water industry, we no longer have one. Yeah, We need to switch patently to new forms of power production, and that will be expensive, but we're constantly being told that that is too expensive for us to do by people who magically seem to have lots of money for other things, or at least advocate for lots of money for other things, and lots of them will tell you there's no such thing as climate change because they also seem to be advocating, like Toby Young does, on behalf of oiled interests. Moving on down, housing. Housing, the big non-issue at the last election in real terms. So many people that cannot afford to live because so much of their wages are taken up with housing. And yet, magically, one of the things that we don't tend to hear about anywhere on the right-wing media is the fact that so many people involved in the building trade or land management donate large amounts of money to the Conservative Party. So everybody has a vested interest in keeping housing and land prices high. Got plenty of land, easy enough to build houses if the government decided to do it. Not going to have that conversation. The conversation we're going to have is there are too many brown people in houses. That's the one. Tax and crime. Yeah, okay, tax kind of speaks for itself. Crime. Well, again, if you completely defunded the police service for a very long period of time, Boris Johnson, saying that he's going to get 20,000 more coppers when that's the number they basically lost. Don't forget that, police officers were at a record high under Blair. Yes, and if you make people a lot poorer, not necessarily due to immigration, but just simply because you're going to drive down their wages, because after all, if you're a teacher or a doctor or a nurse, you don't deserve a wage because your unions, gits that they are going to sabre rattler to try and get you higher wages. Yes, I know, that's been the last few days, isn't it? Astounding. Isn't it awful that these people are being paid more? No. Unbelievable. And these are the same people that will talk about union paymasters for Labour. Well, okay then, let's have a conversation about the funding of political parties. And again, that's something you just won't do. Crime. Yeah, crime will happen and will go up if people are poor, especially if you underfund a police force. And we need root and branch change in the police force. Not because of two-tier policing. That isn't realistically a thing. That's just a bunch of right-wing commentators whinging because a bunch of racists have had to, having listened to them for decades, have had to, face consequences for their action. I do notice that a lot of these commentators now have put up stupid little caveats about on their social media feed. No, it won't save you. We know who you are and what you say. Moving down, defence and security. Okay, Britain's future relationship with the EU. Again, something that just wasn't there in the election. Not everybody, a vast numbers of people want to rejoin the EU. But of course we can't do that. Why? Because it would give the game away that the whole point of Brexit was machinations within the Conservative Party and various people not wanting to pay more tax. I'm looking at you, Jacob Rees-Mogg. Pensions. Isn't it awful pensions are low? Oddly, you can't actually blame that on immigrants because we have the lowest pensions in Europe by far. And whose fault is that? Well, a government that's just decided it can't be bothered because old people will vote Conservative and most of the boomers are well off anyway, so it's just not an issue. Moving on, education, another one. Schools falling down. Whose fault is it? Can't really blame the Marxist teachers for that. Personally, I don't go in with a sledgehammer and just start whacking away at things. However, if you don't spend any money because you have to pay for tax cuts, that might be the reason. Welfare benefits, yes indeed, because that's a huge issue. Suddenly become a huge issue, isn't it? All those work-shoving gits that are out there costing you money. Awful thing. But let's talk about how maybe we could pay for better services for people generically across the board and where that money might come from in terms of a wealth tax. Oh, no. That cannot be on the table. We cannot ever have a discussion about having a wealth tax because the wealthy don't want it and they run your media. Conflict in Gaza, yes, because certain people who aren't necessarily rabid jihadists actually are worried about Britain's place in the world. Again, the right-wing media don't want you to believe that. All those Jewish people that go on those marches in London standing next to Palestinian flags don't really exist. Family life and childcare. Again, some of the most appalling childcare in Europe. Why? The government doesn't want to do it. We could have it for free if we had that conversation as a group of people. But instead, when we talk about children, what we say is, oh, them jihadists want to get hold of the little girls and rape them. That's basically the conversation magically that we have, which isn't realistically what people are concerned about. Well, the racists are, obviously, and transport, which is probably, in many ways, the epitome, along with water, of the Conservatives, isn't it? Yeah. Oh, no, we can't possibly have a sensible integrated transport policy which would actually be cheaper than what we do now, because various people wouldn't make as much money out of it. Oddly, though, if we look at what, BAME individuals, be they Asian or black or otherwise, are interested in, the number one thing on the list isn't actually global jihad. I know, strange, isn't it, that these people, almost like they're real human beings, have the same interests and concerns as the rest of us. Now, slightly higher in terms of the whole Gaza thing, but other than that, people at the bottom who are, doing their work, paying their taxes, also want a decent life, which they've been denied because people keep saying that they are the problem, rather than those people who actually have real economic and social power. Anyway, that's just me being, factual, isn't it? As Stuart Leeds says, you can prove anything with facts, can't you? Anyway, do have a lovely midweeky day, if you can. Enjoy the last few weeks of this summer.